Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And a very warm welcome to Sunday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. How did Superman 2 avoid the too much destruction rap that Man of Steel got back in 2013? Well, that's simple. They didn't have too many explosions, and that's why they avoided that rap. Now, I want to talk about the difference between the mentality of Superman 2 that pretty much has the same scenario as Man of Steel, but executed in two different ways. Now, there's nothing wrong with being different. You know, Man of Steel was made in 2013 and Superman 2 was released in 1980. So there's a big gap and the mentality is even bigger and wider. In fact, it's a chasm. You see, Man of Steel is attempting to be all edgy and wise the fuck up. This is what would happen if Superman was in the real world and there was an alien invasion. Where Superman 2 is just trying to uplift and entertain its audience. Now, I love the Snyderverse for what it is, and I love Man of Steel. But that doesn't mean I think Man of Steel, is this perfect, movie or perfect Superman movie. Actually, I think the opposite of that, even though I love the movie. You see, Man of Steel has a lot of environmental commentary in it. But, for example, it's got Zod and the Kryptonians bring this world engine to Earth and they try and change the atmospherics of Earth so Kryptonians can live there. Now, this is what NASA are attempting to do all the time, every day, on different planets. So there's lots of huge commentary in this film. Unfortunately, all this commentary falls on deaf ears because all we can remember are the loud noises, the explosions, and the stunning VFX. So it's trying to be this edgy, environmental kind of commentary in the film, but ultimately all you remember it for is the VFX and the explosions and the loudness and the crash bang about the movie. Now, in that element, it succeeded to do what it wanted to do. But Superman 2 isn't trying to be edgy. Superman 2 isn't attempting, to say this is the real world and this is how it would be. No, this is a comic book character. This is a comic book world. I mean, you can even see it with Michael Shannon's Zod compared to Terrence Stamp's Zod. Terrence Stamp's Zod is very comic booky. Kneel before Zod! You will kneel before Zod! This is an old-fashioned moustache-twirly villain who really doesn't have much nuance about him. He was once like Shannon Zod on Krypton. He was someone who was charged with protecting, as a military leader, the planet. And something happened, he didn't really believe in the system anymore, and he decided to enact a coup. It's the same story executed in different ways. But in Superman 2, Zod is a very different character to Shannon Zod. Now, Shannon is really kind of like these kind of evil dictators, if you like. Bin Laden, Saddam Hussein. Like, Bin Laden probably once upon a time was this ordinary kind of Middle Eastern guy who was angered and corrupted about what was happening and, decided that actually collateral damage was okay. And, as long as his message was put out there, and this is what happens to Zod. He doesn't care that the humans are going to die because he's going to change the atmospherics of the planet. All he cares about is saving his race. It's something evil dictators say all the time. So it's, as I say, it's got a lot of nuance to it, and you decide yourself if Zod's a villain or a hero. But in the movie that I grew up with General Zod in Superman 2, General Zod's just a fun, campy villain. But he does come across very dangerous. He does look like a dangerous fucker. He is evil. So he's a well-played, well-written, and well-executed villain. And a great foe for Superman to come up against. Now, Superman 2 is the first movie that does the superhero supervillain battle. It's the first one I ever saw, and they do it so well. They do it so well because it's entertaining, and it really does put Superman through the mire. It does challenge Superman. It's a brilliant third act, if you ask me. The Superman 2, supervillain, superhero battle between Zod, Non, and Ursa is better than the battle between Zod and Superman in Man of Steel, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for that. But why? Because the little kind of drippings of the battle at the end, when Zod's looked around him and his plans failed and he's angry at Superman, there's a lot of buildings collapsing, they're fighting. It doesn't last too long, and it's done. Zod breaks his neck. Well, Superman breaks Zod's neck, and it's done. But in Superman 2, you get the whole thing. Superman loses his powers. It's very emotional. He's given up his Kryptonian life and essence for Lois Lane. It's an emotional story. He then realizes Zod's on the prowl. He has to get his powers back. He has to hitch a ride back to the North Pole. It's very compelling. He finds the green crystal. He becomes Superman again. And when he's standing up by that window and he's saying, "General, would you care to step outside?" the whole world's going, "Yeah, Superman!" We're all sitting in that fucking cinema, right? Chanting Superman's name. That's not what we're doing in Man of Steel. I'm not a Snyder hater, but I'm being generally honest about my opinion. Because that's how cinema has changed today. We've gone from uplifting and entertaining audiences to trying to be edgy. We've decided to put Superman in the real world. Imagine what a hideous society we have become, where we want to force our audiences' faces and eyes wide open in the real world, that we actually made a Superman film. Well, I didn't, but Snyder and Nolan, and I'll get onto him in a minute, and I'll reference back to his interview with Richard Donner. This is why it shocks me what he allowed to happen with Man of Steel, and Geoff Johns was trying to stop what was happening in Man of Steel. Maybe, quite right too. Maybe Geoff Johns isn't the villain you all think he is and was. So you've got this film, Man of Steel, that puts Superman in the real world. It's a contemporary take at Superman. And the audience bit back and said, "You know what? This is not how we want Superman executed." The audience said, like the existing Superman fans and younger people, don't forget this is 2013. We've already had several MCU movies, and Avengers at that time was the most successful superhero movie of all time. That film was entertaining and uplifting. So what did Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder and Nolan and Goya do? Do something quite the stark opposite. Now don't forget, Man of Steel was made to create a franchise. Man of Steel was made to make money. They wanted this Superman movie to make $1 billion. What happened when it didn't make $1 billion? They blamed Superman for not being relevant. Yeah, it's always Superman's fault, right? When creative bankruptcy fails Superman, it's always Superman's fault. When Superman 4 flopped, terrible movie, made. They didn't invest in it. They let poor Christopher Reeve's creative vision down. Who did they blame? They blamed Superman. It's always Superman's fault. It's never their fault. That's ironic, right? What happens after Man of Steel? Well, obviously people don't want to see Superman on his own. Let's throw Batman into the mix. So you've got Superman 2, this really entertaining, uplifting movie. When you come out of Superman the movie and Superman 2, you want to be Superman. You are uplifted. You want to live in Metropolis. You want to be part of these adventures, right? Superman has saved the day, but he really goes through it in Superman 2. His journey in Superman the movie is a little bit more basic and easier, and his challenge is more easy to accomplish in Superman the movie, because that's how origin movies normally are. But in the sequel, Superman 2, he's got a huge challenge. He's got to fight these 3 Kryptonian villains just as strong as him. And they nearly win because he embraces his humanity. That's the thing with Superman. He envies everyone else for being normal. And he wants what everyone else wants in Superman 2. He sees everyone else coupled up with families, children, wives. He wants the same for himself. In fact, in the Donner cut, there's a moment he goes, haven't I given enough to the people? What about me? Don't I have a right to be happy? So he's being a little bit selfish in this film, but he's not a robot. He's Superman, he's good, he's pure, but he's not a robot. And these are the kind of issues Superman 2 deals with. But ultimately, in the end, he has to embrace his Kryptonian heritage. And the best live action stories of Superman do this. So Superman 2 avoids, having this too much destruction thing. It's not too violent. In fact, Dick Lester, and Richard Donner, both of these did separate versions. Both of these directors did separate versions of one movie. They avoid the violence. There is some explosions. There is some exciting set pieces. There are battles. There's heat vision. There's freeze breath. It's exciting, but it also can be quite funny and fun at times. Now, people will call out the moment when Superman throws the bag with the Superman insignia on in the fortress and say it's silly. Yes, it is silly, but I'd rather be silly than overthinking things and taking yourself too seriously and trying to subvert expectations. But that is modern day Hollywood opposed to old Hollywood in a nutshell. I was watching a Laurel and Hardy documentary the other day and I started to cry when I think about the world we live in today. Laurel and Hardy was just a basic thing, right? Two dudes, really talented, at really the peak and beginning of Hollywood. They are still famous today. People still, young and old, watch their stuff today because it's universal. It's timeless. They're funny. They work together. Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton. These guys invented what Hollywood is today. But Hollywood, I'm not going to say has moved on, because it hasn't. It's devolved into something else. It's not about entertainment anymore. It's about subverting expectations. It's about divisive conversations. Zack Snyder said a while back, I'm happy that people hate Batman versus Superman because they're still talking about it. He said about the uplifting Aquaman, who's talking about Aquaman? That says it all, because you've got a director like James Wan making a stunning movie that works emotionally and with its characters. And that is a really uplifting movie. And you've got Snyder saying, yeah, but who's talking about it? Who's shit talking it? Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the point. This is where we've been dragged down to. You've actually got people hate watching stuff and making money from YouTube videos by hate watching. This is the era we're in. Entertainment used to uplift us, but not anymore. It's got to subvert our expectations. It's got to, it's got to make us angry. It's got to be about toxic masculinity, that old thing. This is where we have been depraved and sunk down to. And you can see it with Man of Steel. I'll repeat again for the pie eaters at the back. I loved the movie, but ultimately Man of Steel is like a meal that could have been absolutely perfect, and its restaurant could have been given 5 Michelin stars, but it didn't add the right amount of the ingredients it needed. It wanted to be sweet, but it oversaturated its sugar, sweet flavour. It wanted to be a little bit salty, but it put a bag of salt instead of like a tablespoon of salt in the recipe. So as I said earlier, so all that environmental commentary, that great environmental commentary, gets lost. No one even notices it. It's like it's not there, because all anyone remembers is the destruction, the explosions, the boofs and the bangs, and the stunning VFX. Man of Steel's VFX is stunning. We see on Twitter GIFs from Snyderverse stands all the time. Look at the stunning cinematography of Zack Snyder, and VFX. Some people mistake great VFX for great cinematography. There is a difference, by the way, but these people are more interested in stunning cinematography than a movie that uplifts them. But as a kid and as a young adult and a teenager in my early 20s, I didn't demand uplifting entertainment. It was just the norm. Of course, the 80s, 90s and early thousands had really bad movies as well. But nobody back then was trying to upset you or break your heart or tell you you're a toxic male. When I was growing up, there were films of varied content. There was the uplifting entertainment. There was the biopics. There was the movies about Vietnam, casualties of war, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July. People making films telling you that the Vietnam War was so wrong, it should never have happened. Hundreds and thousands of American boys died for no fucking reasons, and these directors were angry about it. Now, some people get upset about those films and call them un-American and unpatriotic. But the thing the people who hate what those movies are trying to say can't do is say they're not well-made movies and not compelling. And in fact, even some pro-war people have seen those movies and said, you know what? Oliver Stone and the other directors who made those films have a point. That's the difference. So you had the Vietnam movies. You had JFK, you had films like The Bodyguard, very uplifting. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The Lethal Weapon franchise, brilliant. And in today's terms, it ticks all the boxes, right? You've got a white guy and a black guy equally starring in a movie. And this is about a white guy and a black guy who become friends. The black guy is the one in the steady family, middle-class environment, and the white guy is suicidal and a fuck-up. And if it isn't for the love of the black man and the black family, that white guy will end up killing himself. But it's done in a beautiful way. And in all the promotion, you don't get Dick Donner and the cast saying, oh yeah, aren't we amazing? Aren't we great that we've got a movie of black people, right? A black family with a white guy in it. They're not saying that. They're saying, we made a movie, here it is, hope you like it, which we did. Because the idea was to make an uplifting, entertaining movie. And that's what the first Lethal Weapon is. And the rest of them, by the way, even the fourth one that people don't like, still find it very entertaining. So there was an uplifting element of entertainment. I was watching the Uncharted sequel, Disenchanted, on Disney Plus last night. First time I got around to watching it. And I had a smile. My heart was like it had sunshine in it. I was crying tears of fucking joy. It's been a long time that I watched anything made by Disney that I felt this way about. Yes, this is a very different video today because we are talking about the DC situation, but we're talking about the problem with modern day entertainment in general. It keeps on telling you that you need to see yourself on the screen, but that is not the whole point. Because when I grew up, stories were aspirational. The worlds were aspirational. The characters were aspirational. And I didn't give a shit about seeing myself on the screen. Now, SJWs will say, yeah, but you're a man and you saw more men. But here's the thing. When I watched The Accused, I wanted to be as brave as Sarah Tobias was after being raped. I wanted to be Ripley on the spaceship in both movies. I wanted to be like Ripley. I went in the garden and pretended to be Ripley. I pretended to be Sarah Connor in Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day, as well as all the other I wanted to be Michael Knight and the other, great leading characters I grew up with who were males. But I also had aspirations to be like the women I saw in films. And I could list off more and more women I grew up watching. Sue Ellen Ewing in Dallas. She was married to a tyrannical oil man, and she became an alcoholic. The man purposely put her in a sanitarium, an asylum, right? And she overcame all of that. I admired that and I wanted to be like her too. So men can aspire to be like brave, feisty, independent women as much as they can aspire to be like the men and the boys they see on the screen as well. So seeing yourself on the screen isn't actually important. It's the aspirational element of characters and storytelling. And again, it's something that we lost. Are you telling me growing up, black men, black women, and other minorities didn't want to be Doctor Who? Of course they did. Are you telling me that black boys and other, minorities didn't want to be Superman growing up just because he was white? Of course not. Of course they could still aspire to be Superman. Anyone could be Superman in their back fucking garden or on the street playing with the other kids, right? That's the point. It's not about the colour of your skin. It doesn't matter if you're watching a woman, a man, or a fucking robot. Jesus Christ. I mean, who remembers Short Circuit? I would have loved to have been that robot. But I'm not a fucking robot, right? These films were all aspirational. Well, we've lost the entertainment and the fun and the aspirational quality of movies. And going back to the DC subject, because this is why we're here for, this is why the Snyderverse and the DCEU ultimately failed and destroyed the whole franchise. Because Man of Steel isn't attempting to be aspirational or uplifting. Now, Christopher Nolan co-wrote the story for Man of Steel. This is a man who is a big fan of Superman the movie. In fact, constructed his Batman Begins movie, one of my favourite Batman films of all time, as Donner set up Superman the movie. He interviewed him and complimented him for what he did with Superman. He then, in Man of Steel, allows people to do the absolute fucking, opposite of what Donner did with Superman the movie. And I'm not one of those who thinks all Superman films should be like the Dick Donner Superman movie, and that's not what I'm saying. But they reversed all the values of what Donner did, right? It was about putting Superman in the real world, yada, yada, yada. And the audience, the mainstream general audience said, no, we don't want to watch Superman break someone's neck, right? We don't want Superman crashing Zod into a petrol station and not even looking back or caring if anyone's been killed in said petrol station. I'll never forget that moment when Zod confesses to killing Jor-El to Superman. Superman's laying there going, you killed him? And that was it. He's not angry. They don't have him saying, you should face justice for what you did to my father. Superman can't turn around and say, I'm going to kill you for what you did, an eye for an eye. But he doesn't even seem to care that Zod killed Jor-El. It's weird. Now there's that great moment. You think you can threaten my mother? So it's contradictory, right? So there's elements there. And I mean, I'm nitpicking with the whole him not reacting to Jor-El's death, but that's always kind of bothered me. The whole point is that Man of Steel looks good. There's the essence of a great story in the film, but it gets lost because the recipe oversaturates what it's attempting to do. But that's not the real problem with Man of Steel opposed to Superman 2 or Superman the movie. The real problem is it's trying to be edgy. It's trying to put a fictional fantasy-based character in the real world. And let's be honest, what Superman fan actually asked for a character that's been helping them escape and deal with all their anxieties and depression and fears and being bullied during their school days? Who asked you, right, to put that character in the real world? Nobody wanted Superman in the real world. The only ones celebrating this are the people saying, before Man of Steel, I didn't even like Superman. Yes, because the element of Superman doesn't attract you, right? And that's fine. So you like this real world Superman because he's a real world Superman. But that's not really the point of Superman. Superman's about finding a better way other than killing. So Goya decided to put Superman in a real world and say he has no choice but to kill. within that narrative, within that script. He did it on purpose. So we have an industry attempting to subvert expectations, putting all our beautiful fantasy characters in the real world so we have no escape. Is it any surprise that this generation is suffering with depression, anxiety, mass male suicides? Because not only are we depressing the fuck out of people and we've got no varied variety in our content in movie theatres and televisions anymore, right? We're bashing on men and calling all men misogynists and homophobes and the name calling I just see on social media, let alone the toxic commentary against men and boys in our entertainment. And sometimes I do watch old stuff and I do have a cry, like I said earlier, because it does make me sad, like the world I'm growing old in. Because yeah, you do look at your childhood with rose-coloured glasses, and I don't think I had the best childhoods in the world. Now, I didn't have to want for anything, and we had lovely homes and things, but I had learning difficulties. I suffered with dyslexia. I still do. If you read my Twitter post, I struggle to remember letters and stuff sometimes. I don't punctuate at all, and I get mocked, and I have the piss ripped out of me for that. So I wasn't like the perfect student like my brother, who's 11 months younger than me. So it was always like, why can't you be like your brother and shit like that? And then I had to like go to a special learning school as well. So I didn't have the greatest of childhoods. So all I had was my telly box and my VHS videos that I would used to record my favourite films and my TV shows on. And rewatching Knight Rider and recording it. I lived in a fantasy world. I had to escape. If I didn't have that beautiful, uplifting entertainment, I probably would have killed myself as a young boy because I wouldn't have had any escape. Well, think about being a young boy or a girl or however people, identify as, right? Imagine not having the fantasy and escapism. Pixar movies are talking about real world issues. Isn't that brave and bold? No, because you're forcing young people not to have an escape. This is the very difference between Man of Steel and Superman 2, which literally is doing exactly the same thing. It's got exactly the same villain in it, General Zod. It's just done in a different way. Now, I love the commentary with General Zod in Man of Steel. Shannon delivers one of the greatest villain performances of all time. But never take it away from Terrence Stamp as the Zod in Superman 2. He is delivering as excellent performance, but his character doesn't have as much depth or nuance. Neither does he have to, because it's just a movie with a villain who's bad, but he still puts Superman through the sod. He gives Superman a huge challenge in the movie. He's a much greater foe than Lex Luthor was in Superman the movie. The movie does its job. It uplifts you by the end. When he crushes Zod's hand and, the Superman theme comes up, it's uplifting. It's simple stuff. And that's what entertainment is. And that's what entertainment should be. We live in a world today where when the entertainment industry fails, it's yours and my fault, apparently. If I write and direct and perform in a play that people don't like, I feel really bad. That's not my audience's fault. That's my fault for failing my audience. They're not a toxic audience. They're not part of toxic fandom. I have let them down. So I have to keep on trying and trying again until I uplift that audience and entertain them and give them the escape. In that audience, there'll be people suffering with anxiety, depression, dying of cancer, and whatever else people are going through. They look to me to have a vessel to escape to. They look to Hollywood and the entertainment industry to have an element of escapism. And when you say, do you know what? We're going to take Superman, a character you've always been able to escape to, and bring him in the real world, ultimately the general audience are going to say no. You can do this with other characters. I mean, it's like the Batman situation, having Ben Affleck's Batman branding people. Is that really what people wanted to see Batman doing? Again, I love BVS. I think Snyder is an excellent director. But maybe his kind of nuances and, values as a filmmaker and a storyteller are better served in originality, original stories like Rebel Moon, rather than superheroes, and especially Superman. And imagine being the comic book writers who have written Superman for decades and generations, and they're seeing what happened with Man of Steel and BVS. It's sacrilege to them, right? And this is why Snyder divided audiences and divided people and subverted expectations, because Zack Snyder loves subversive comics like Watchmen. So he tried to do to Superman and Batman what Alan Moore did with Watchmen. Well, if Alan Moore didn't take Superman and Batman and subvert them. Alan Moore created his own world and universe and subverted expectations by creating something new and fresh. You can't create subversion via already existing characters. And this is exactly what today's entertainment industry is attempting to do. And you see it with Man of Steel, you see it with Superman 2, and that, my friends, is what the problem is with entertainment today. This has been Sunday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wife. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Do I see you again? Goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.